The financial system is under attack. The cracks are beginning to show as banks are being bailed out and hard-working people yet again are left to pick up the pieces. This is unacceptable. We were told that after the 2008 financial crash that measures were put in place so that this could not happen again. Personally, I don't want to risk my family's financial future to find out if that's true or not. Are you prepared? Do you have a plan? Can you weather the storm with confidence? Don't be at the back of the line. Act now. Visit goldbusters.co.uk and protect your family today.
Hello and welcome to the Charlie Ward Show. I'm Paul and today I am joined by Jesse Beltran and he is here to talk to us all about Havana syndrome. But just first off, I'm going to get him to introduce himself. Jesse, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, again, you've mentioned my name. My name's Jesse Beltran. I'm a retired firefighter paramedic from the city of Sacramento here in California in the United States. After my retirement, I became the president of an organization called the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies, and I am currently a certified master hypnotist with my diploma in hypnotherapy.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty subject that you've come on today. So Havana syndrome, can you explain what it is, please? Because this is a first for me as well.
Okay, so the Havana syndrome is a phenomenon that, according to the Department of Homeland Security here in the United States, that our diplomats were experiencing at our U.S. embassy in Havana, Cuba. And what the diplomats were complaining about is an acute onset of these strange sounds, followed by headaches, nausea, vomiting, vertigo disturbances, and electrical shocks to the extremities. And this was affecting them, they believe, was in the embassy, but in reality, it was affecting them wherever they went. This also was not taken seriously by the United States initially. They thought it was some type of psychosis or hysteria phenomenon. And it wasn't until the Canadian diplomats started experiencing the same phenomena that the United States took it seriously. In March of this year, the Department of Homeland Security held a hearing, and there was a gentleman by the name of retired Lieutenant Colonel Greg Edgren, and he testified to Congress that the Havana syndrome is a real phenomenon. It is happening, and it is happening on every continent on this planet right now, with the exception of Antarctica. And more specifically, it's afflicting the best of our best people in the federal government. Our top CIA agents, our top diplomats, our FBI, and there are a couple of cases affecting politicians here in the United States currently. Now, when I was president of the ISA Act, the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies, we started covering this phenomenon in 2009 and documenting it in 2010. And the reason that is I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall. He's an anesthesiologist, board certified, out of Texas, and he wrote 2 books. The first book was called A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America, and the second book is called Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control. And he had discussed with me this phenomenon. He was seeing individuals here in the homeland who were experiencing these symptoms. But back then, there wasn't the Havana syndrome, or what a word that's used commonly now is called anomalous health incidences. Our government is only saying it's afflicting government personnel, but we know it's been here domestically since then. Now, it's brought me all over the world, and what we were doing is, because they were complaining, they believe it's some type of signal directed at them. The government is saying it's a directed energy weapon, but we know, because we've taken people deep underground, under miles of granite, and we're still detecting signals in areas where there are no cell towers, nothing out there, and we're still detecting a signal. So how do we detect these signals? So what we decided to do, because Dr. Hall said what would happen if these clients of his would complain about this going to their general practitioner, they would get labeled with some type of mental disorder or psychosis and then be re-victimized because they're put on medications and that sort of treatment. So I said, well, why don't we do this on a mass scale so we can get some tangible data, and instead of it being subjective, that we can now have measurements and have a story to tell based on the data. And so I started in Sacramento, California. Our first meeting had 100 people show up, and I was completely flabbergasted. They all had the same symptoms, very little deviation. And then we held a second one, and the second one was in Davis, California, and we had 300 people show up. But what was interesting about the statistics, the picture that was painting, the people who were most affected on the Pacific Coast were recently widowed, single or divorced Caucasian women who were highly educated. They tend to be the #1 group that were afflicted with this phenomenon. Then it became Caucasian males, then African American females, African American males, Asians, and it dwindled down in ethnicity. So that carried on into the Midwest, same statistics, no deviation, until we got to the East Coast. The East Coast, it flipped a little bit, where Caucasians and African Americans sort of flipped there. And there was one anomaly that was in Virginia, and those were all military subcontractors. Okay, so what did we gather from the data? People were coming up positive for some bizarre RF emission around their person and very specific focal points around their person. And what we use is called a JM20 Pro. It's a general frequency detector, and you can calibrate it so that you can be within 2 inches of an emission in order for it to go off. We live in a wireless society, so it's important that we do that, and there are no aberrant signals that we're getting. But this is a preliminary scanner, and we did this because it allowed us to do a lot of people in a day versus where we're at today. So what were we finding? You can superimpose those who were experiencing the exact symptoms that the federal employees of Havana syndrome over each other, and they're all identical. There was another subsection, the military. Those who were in the military, they were coming up positive around their person, but slightly different, and you can superimpose those over each other, and they were all the same. And then there were people who were incarcerated, and those who were incarcerated were also different from those two groups, but you can put them over each other, and they were exactly the same. So what are we finding? So we had, because they were coming up in these preliminary scans, in areas around their person, we said, okay, we really need to isolate this more to see whether or not it's actually coming from the person or it's being emitted to the person for some reason. Okay? Now, the Department of Homeland Security is saying that these are directed energy weapons that are being pointed at these federal employees. And so we use a common sense approach. We say, well, think about this logistically and financially. To be targeting that many people at one time is a logistical nightmare. It's a feat that is not feasible. So then you say, okay, then what makes these individuals, unfortunately, special enough to receive this signal? So our theory was there has to be something internally within these individuals that's causing them to receive this signal. So I was invited to Europe by a government agency and on a couple of occasions, and I had to sign an NDA, but they asked me to come and test some of their diplomats and some of their family members. And if I knew of people who I was sure that were afflicted by this, I could bring them with me to test them in what's called an anechoic chamber. An anechoic chamber is a very high-end, I don't know if you know what a Faraday cage is, but basically an anechoic chamber, they're millions of dollars, and they block out large frequency spectrums. And specifically, it covered the frequency spectrums that we were going to be testing for. So we felt confident, okay, let's use controls. Let's people who are not afflicted by this and are perfectly normal, and we tested them within the environment. No frequency emissions. But the people who came up positive in the preliminary scans, when we put them in the environment, we were getting signals. And that was really where we said, okay, now we can confidently say, for whatever reason, we are detecting a frequency around their person and in an environment that blocks out these frequencies, so we should not be detecting them in the environment unless it's being emitted from within the environment. And what we have found is we're now pulling out implants. And I'll share with your audience what they looked like back then and what we're seeing today. And can you see my screen there?
I can indeed, yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so initially, the implants over 20 years ago were about the shape of a capsule, a grain of rice. Now what we see here, this is a cancerous tumor. This case here is a gentleman by the name of Bob Boyce. And Bob Boyce, when I spoke to him about this topic, he said, Jesse, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I just decided that I was going to die. Now, he was an inventor of a high-efficiency engine, and he had a Faraday cage, and he would do RF emission testing in those environments on his inventions. And by accident, the wand went over his shoulder, and it pinged on the frequency detector. It's the exact same thing that we're using out in the field. And so he thought it was odd, so he went and got an X-ray, and they found a microchip surrounded by this cancerous tumor. Now, he had it removed and went to pathology, and I asked him, I said, so whatever happened to the microchip? And he says, it disappeared after pathology. So that's okay, he's alive, his cancer was going into remission, he was happy about that aspect of his life. But the cancer came back very aggressively. So he went back into the Faraday cage, scanned his person, and they found a second microchip surrounded by cancer. This time they were smarter about it. They had a chain of custody. They were able to identify a serial number, and the serial number on this microchip went back to an NSA database. And there his case got basically stalled because they said it was a national security issue. So that's one case. The next case I want to show is this here is another case. This is the Larson case.
Can you make it bigger, please, Jesse?
Yes, I'm going to make it bigger.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the Larson case. This is Dave Larson. He was a politician out of Southern California. Now, he had 10 implants pulled from his person, over 10. And you can see that this was well within 2 decades ago. And look at the size of these implants that were being pulled out of him. This is the letter on a penny. This is how small they were. And there were various types of implants. Now, he sued, and the case was thrown out of court. And the reason it was thrown out of court is because he unwittingly signed to be in an experiment. And this is part of our fight today, is that if you're involved in an experiment, that you should get full disclosure, because any partial disclosure is deceitful. And had he had known that this is what they were going to do to him, he would never have participated. And I fully know that.
Can I just jump in here, Jesse? Sorry. What was the experiment he was in?
So these are biosensors. And what they were doing down in Southern California, this was a medical company. They were experimenting with these biosensors to get real-time data off the human body. And that's what the experiment was about. And wow. Yeah, and so the next case I'm going to show you, and this is how scary this is. We're now in the nano size with these implants. And this is a client of mine who was involved in the initial onset when we started scanning people in masses. And this is a collection of 3 specimens which was removed from her. And notice what they're calling them. We had a chain of custody. Whoops, I'm sorry. There was a chain of custody, but these are all, they found biosensors in here. They were of metallic and silicone microarrays that were pulled out of her. And this is what they look like today. They are so small that you can literally fit hundreds of these in the tip of a needle. This is actually a nanowire. There's a nano array. Our bodies do not reject them. So our bodies will encapsulate them now. And here's another type of implant, and that's another one, okay? So this is what we're pulling out of people today. Now, interestingly enough, every single symptom that those federal employees, our diplomats, our CIA agents, the best of our best are experiencing, so are these victims. They're the exact same symptoms. But again, we used a common sense approach. We said, okay, if our theory is right, then there's got to be something special, unfortunately, with these victims on how they're receiving these signals. And this is how we know that they are receiving these. Then these are all biosensors. Now the problem is today, when I was in Virginia scanning those military subcontractors, they all had the same complaints as everyone else. There's very little deviation. I will say this: there are some cases though that it probably is more of a mental health issue, but we've been doing this for a long time, so we know that when we see someone who is claiming that they're experiencing this, we know there are some specific things that they will always complain of. And it's consistent across the board for everyone who's experiencing the Havana syndrome. Okay? But I met with 2 people in the who used to work in the Pentagon when I was there, and they were asking why I was there. They already knew why I was there. But I mentioned very briefly that we were scanning a group of people who believed that they are implanted for some reason. And he says, oh, well, what do they look like? And so he said that depending on the type of implant, he can tell what year they were being made and when they were being put in people. He says, if this is done to you today, you're SOL. There's nothing that can be done because there's no radiographic imagery that's going to detect them, no MRI scans that are going to detect them because they are now nano size. And that's an issue. Where technology is today, we're now dealing with nanotechnology that is not only self-replicating and is now self-assembling. That's how far advanced we have achieved, society has achieved as far as science goes with these technologies. Here's where it gets kind of crazy. Recently there was a lawsuit, and in this lawsuit there was a document that was disclosed. We caught the smoking gun. And this is the Dawn DeVore case that was filed, I believe, in Sacramento, California. She was a nurse in the Department of Corrections. She was a whistleblower, and she became part of this program. But interestingly enough, she intercepted an interfacility document. And this is from the IntelliConnection, a security division of IBM. It says confidential, limited distribution, only level 9. So this is only for top level managers. And it's titled the 2020 Neural Implant. And this is going to blow everyone away. But it's important that we talk about this because there needs to be serious discussions about how technology is completely outpaced our laws, and this is borderline criminal. This is the control of crime will be paramount, a paramount concern in the 21st century. We must be ready with our security products when the demand for them becomes popular. our Research and Development Division has been in contact with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the California Department of Corrections, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the Massachusetts Department of Corrections to run limited trials of the 2020 neural chip implant. We have established representatives of our interests in both management and institutional levels within these departments. So they're getting their own employees hired. Federal regulations do not yet permit testing of implants on prisoners, but we have entered into contractual agreements with privatized healthcare professionals and specified correctional personnel to do limited testing of our product. We have also had major successes in privately owned sanitariums with implant technology. We need, however, to expand our testing to research how effective the 2020 neural implant chip performs in those identified as most aggressive in our society. Limited testing has produced a number of results. In California, several prisoners were identified as members of a security threat group. They were brought to the health services at Pelican Bay and tranquilized with advanced sedatives developed by our Cambridge, Massachusetts laboratories. The implant procedure takes 60 to 90 minutes depending upon the experience of the technician. We are working on a device which will reduce the time by as much as 60%. The results of implants on 8 prisoners yielded the following results. And implants served as surveillance monitoring devices for the threat group. We know that this is a two-way communication system. The data gets transmitted and it also gets received. Implants disabled 2 subjects during an assault on a correctional staff. Universal side effects. In all 8 test subjects revealed that when an implant was set to receive 160 megahertz frequency, all subjects became lethargic and slept on an average of 18 to 22 hours per day. All subjects refused recreation periods. 7 of the 8 subjects did not exercise. Well, if you're lethargic, you're not going to do these things. And each subject was monitored for aggressive activity during the test period, and the findings are conclusive. Out of the 8 test subjects, they exhibited no aggression, even when they were provoked. Okay? It gets worse. Each subject experienced only minor bleeding from the nose and ears 48 hours after the implant due to the initial adjustment. Each subject had no knowledge of the implant for the test period, and each implant was retrieved under the guise of a medical treatment or procedure. It should be noted that the test period was less than 2 months. However, during the period, substantial data was gathered by our research and development team, which suggests that the implants exceeded expected results. One of the major concerns of our security and R&D team, which is research and development, was that the test subject would discover a chemical imbalance during the initial adjustment period, and the test would have to be scrubbed. However, due to advanced technological developments in sedatives administered, the 48-hour adjustment period can be attributed to the prescription medication given to the test subjects after the implant. So instead of blaming it on the implants, they're tricking them and making them think it's the drugs that they were given, okay? And one of the concerns raised by the R&D was the cause of the bleeding and how to eliminate that problem. Unexplained bleeding might cause the subject to inquire further about the routine visit to the infirmary or other healthcare facilities. The security windfall from the brief test period was enormous. Security officials now know several strategies employed by this threat group that facilitate transmission of illegal drugs, weapons into the correctional facilities. One intelligence officer remarked that while they cannot use the information they have in a court of law now, they know what outside concerns they have to be concerned with. So they were concerned about prisoners and correctional officers working in conjunction with each other. Okay. Says our technicians have promised that they can do 3 2020 neural chip implants in less than an hour. Solid officials hope to collect information from the trio to bring a 14-month investigation into drug trafficking by correctional officers to a close. But here's the grand finale. Essentially, the implants make the unsuspecting prisoner a walking, talking recorder of every event he comes into contact with. There are only 5 intelligence officers and the Commissioner of Corrections who actually know the full scope of the implant testing. In Massachusetts, the Department of Corrections has already entered into high-level discussions about releasing certain offenders to the community with the 2020 neural chip implant. Our people are not altogether against the idea. However, attorneys in the IntelliConnection have advised against implant technology outside of strict control settings. Under the present governmental structure, our liability would be enormous. While we have a strong lobby in Congress and various state legislatures favoring our product, we must proceed with the utmost caution on uncontrolled use of the 2020 neural chip. If the chip was discovered in use, not authorized by law, and the procedure traced to us, we could not endure for long the resulting publicity and liability payments. Massachusetts officials have developed an intelligence branch from the Fugitive Task Force Squad that would do limited test runs under tight controls with pre-release subjects. Corrections officials have dubbed the potential test subjects the insurance group. The name derived from the concept of the 2020 implants ensures compliance with the law and allows officials to detect misconduct or violations without question. A retired police detective from Charleston, Massachusetts, now with the intelligence unit, has asked us to consider using a 2020 neural chip implant on hardcore felons suspected of bank or armed robbery, blah, blah, blah. Where I'm wanting to get at, they are now testing this in Vacaville Prison, which is a psych where they send people who they say have psychological issues and prisoners. But this is where we're at. And so, granted, you know, society, throughout society, those who have, we would say have less rights or less influence in our society are going to be those who are diagnosed with mental illness, are prisoners, okay? There's a reason this is being done to them. But we have been documenting that normal people, I've had judges come to me, I've had politicians, I've had physicians, white-collar worker, blue-collar workers, the gamut. This is affecting thousands of people globally now throughout the world. And this is why we're doing what we're doing now, because there needs to be a serious discussion. There was a declassified document, it was called New World Vistas, and it was released by the United States Air Force in 1994, November of 1994. And it was all the great minds talking about how do we keep the United States Air Force a future power 50 years into the future. And starting on page 89, they talk about biological processes. And in that, they talk about this implant technology. Not only do they talk about the implant technology, they talk about, and knowingly, that they can take imprinted memories from an individual and re-implant that into another individual, so that that individual would believe that they had this experience, but they really didn't. So this is really, when I say this is the mark of the beast, this is the mark of the beast in full-fledged steroids. Ewan Cameron was a Canadian psychiatrist many, many years ago, was given funding to try to see if they can erase human memories in the brain and re-imprint them. And he developed a process that was called psychic driving. And the way that worked is he would give induce long-term sleep with these patients with drug therapy. He would use electrical shock therapy. And then he would put this helmet over them, and it had a tape recorder in it. And it would repeat themes over and over and over again. This is called the law of repetition. This is what's used in hypnosis and in some aspects of hypnotherapy. Now, you've read that this is a two-way communication system. They've admitted it here in this document, that this implant technology can not only hear what's going on in the environment, but they can see what's going on in the environment. These implants actually record your EEG patterns. And so now with the advent of AI and everything that's being integrated in these network nodes, there is no such thing as privacy anymore. And so the question that needs to be asked to society is, what are we going to do about it? When are we going to stand up to this? And when are we going to start saying, look, this isn't just happening to federal employees. This is happening to everyday citizens all across the globe. And there's a gentleman in the UK by the name of Dr. Barry Trower. I don't know if you've heard his name. He was a microwave weapons specialist. He was an agent for the UK government. And we had the opportunity to interview him 20 years ago. And everything that I'm disclosing to your audience right now, he said was already being done back then. And he did interrogations, and he talked about this whole process. And he said that transmitting voices into people's head was easy. And he said the scientists would call it a success if they got someone to commit suicide. Now, Colonel Egren testified before Congress in front of Homeland Security that this is a slow kill. Remember, they're going after the best of our best. Now, if this is a two-way communication system, you can kiss national security right out the window. He said that the whole process is to make someone look like they're crazy. And all of your listeners can research what I'm saying. Just look at the Department of Homeland Security hearing that was done this year, March 8th of 2024. And they disclose everything about it. Now, what do we do? Where do we go from here? What we have been doing with ISA Act, when it was in full infancy, we were trying to come up with ways to help people. And so now we're there. Recently, we developed a way to block the modulated signal that's coming in. We can actually use a technique that's called frequency jamming. And it's worked 100% of the time for the individuals who have been suffering with this. Most recently, we had a woman for 20 years, for the first time, she was able to hear quietness and get rest. And that's the issue with this. If you can imagine a high-pitched frequency being sent to you 24/7, 365 days a year, it's going to affect you. And what usually happens, and what Colonel Egren was saying, this was a slow kill, people usually commit suicide. And I can tell you, I have dozens and dozens of cases over the last 20 years where that is the exact result.
Wow. Jesse.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That information download. And I wanted to just ask questions throughout, but I could just see you were on a roll, and wow, what a roll. I've got questions coming out my ears now, and I'm going to try and ask you as many as I can.
Ask away.
And we'll backtrack from there. First and foremost, how did they get these into us?
That's a great question. So, interesting statistic here in the United States. I don't know what the statistic would be in the UK. But if you Google what percentage of our drugs, pre-filled syringes and medications, come from outside of the country, most Americans would be surprised. It's 90% of our medications are imported from other countries, okay? I had the opportunity to scan a group in California. There was a music mogul who invited me. He had heard the work that I was doing and said, can you please humor us and just do a preliminary RF scan on our group? And I said, okay. Well, I didn't expect to find anything, but I was surprised. I did find some positive results in a large percentage of the group. Not everyone, but a large percentage of them. And where they came up positive was the right and left shoulders. There was a couple of deviations where a woman came up positive on her hip, and she said she had a hip surgery. And another one came up positive on the knee. She had a knee surgery. So the only way they can get into you is through an injection, okay? We're now down to the nano size. So whoever's implementing this program is so confident that they were never going to be found on a medical imagery. They probably didn't think that there would be someone out there or a group of people that would figure out if there's indeed this signal being sent, that we could somehow detect it. But we're there. and this is why we're sharing this information, because it's important. This is either an arms race. President Putin did say to the in an article in the Politico, he said the first superpower to master psychotronic weapons will be the superpower to rule the world. Okay, so who has this technology now? We know that the United States does. We know that Russia does. They're probably the one country that's more advanced in this than us. We know that China does, and we know that the UK has this. Okay, so one would have to draw your own conclusion. It has to be an injection of some sort. Now there's other ways, and with the advent of how small the nanotech is, you can probably ingest it. You can probably breathe it in. There's a number of techniques that the literature is saying that's out there in order to get this into a specimen. So that's one way. Now, I don't want everyone to freak out and think that every medical professional is out there knowingly doing this to people, because I would say not, because most people who are in the medical industry are truly there to help people. Okay, I know that's why I became a firefighter paramedic. I just wanted to help people, and we just take for granted these medications that are pre-filled, that they're supposed to do what we believe they're supposed to do. Okay, so I think there's a very, very small percentage of people who are knowingly doing this to individuals. But we have the smoking gun here. We have the declassified documents. We know that implant technology was being experimented with through a FOIA release by the US military in the 40s and 50s. So this has been around for a long time. It's just now it's everything on steroids.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at delivery systems, because I'm sure there's guidance as well saying, oh, if you're giving them this, you need to inject it at this site. So they know full well that their device will be injected where they want it to be injected, because do what it says on the tin.
Yes, exactly.
Moving into my next question is, how are these things powered? So
the human body, well, that's a good question. The human body creates a very low voltage. So just by being in us, these can be powered that way. So I'm going to step back and talk about our testing process, because it's important we talk about that. So initially we'll do an RF scan with our frequency detector in the field. If it comes up positive, and we say, well, you might want to get a panoramic X-ray of the jaw area, and you might want to get an MRI scan. Then if that comes up positive, or nowadays it's probably not going to be as advantageous as getting what is called a nonlinear junction scan. So a nonlinear junction scan is a device that not only checks for active technology, so something that's on 24/7, but it also activates passive technology. So there's passive technology in which you have to send a signal to the implant or biosensor in order for it to turn on. So what a nonlinear junction scan will do, it tests for ferrous material. Send an echo out. If it detects ferrous material in your person, it'll reflect another echo, which will turn the implant on. And then it'll detect the frequency range. Okay, that's what it's testing for. So I hope that answers the question on how these things are powered. But that's in layman's terms, that's how you would describe it.
Moving into my next question, because you've answered that absolutely beautifully. Have you had hands-on on one of these implants?
Yes.
Is it quite a rigid thing? Is there any texture to it? Or, well, the looks of it, they're coming in many different sizes now.
Yeah, they're all different shapes and sizes. The ones that I've had my hand on are the traditional rice type, the VeriChip type. Okay, the ones that I disclosed to you, and this was my one of my very first clients, and she's a sweetheart. And you're just like, why would anyone do this to her? They have completely wreaked havoc on her life. when her husband was going to leave her because he thought she was crazy. And he called me through the recommendation of Dr. John Hall, and he spoke to me, and I invited him to one of our first meetings. And he was in tears. It was very emotional for him because he's like, I almost left the woman I love because I thought she was crazy and there was no helping her. But he heard everyone else with the same complaints as her. And that's what changed his mind. And, you know, that in itself was all worth it to me. But we've pulled these out of her. And the crazy thing is, these physicians are heroes. The ones who have removed these implants are just heroes to our species as humans. But they are being threatened to have their medical licenses removed. So now it's getting more and more difficult to find doctors who will remove these out of people. And that's an issue that needs to be dealt with. But the Department of Homeland Security at least is acknowledging that this exists. They put aside funding for federal employees and their family members, even though they deny that it is happening to civilians. I'm pretty sure that their family members are civilians too who are suffering from this. So, you know, they're not answering it directly, but they're inferring. They can't confirm that civilians are suffering with this, but we can. Even though there's funding now, there is not a code for Havana syndrome for these federal employees to get treatment. So they're trying to work on that. And I think I've spoken to Secret Service agents, I've spoken to Pentagon officials, I've spoken to high-level people in three-letter agencies, names, and you know, they say help is coming, at least for the federal level. We just need to work on getting help for people in the civilian level.
I've got to ask, is help really coming, or are they just trying to work out who's doing this and then take control of them for their own means? I mean, This is what we've seen over the last 4 years, and some people will say even longer. Makes me think, are they really going to help us, or are they going to refine the technology? Because looking back at that documentation, you know, they managed to subdue people. I mean, make them lethargic and not want to get up. Now, that's a powerful weapon to have. There's no more protesting because everyone's too tired. They've stayed in bed that day.
Or it completely incapacitates you. Here's the other thing. If you wanted to do a social engineering experiment, remember, they can implant false memories. They can make you do something that you wouldn't normally do. That's an issue in itself. This is Pandora's box. This is the worst case scenario for our species. Now, I've met with a scientific investigative journalist, and she was probably, I would say, one of the most intelligent people I've come across in a long time. And she disclosed with me, and this was what she was sharing with me, is that in the 70s, they redefined what the definition of human was. And with this nanotechnology, and I have some research articles that point blank say this, that this self-replicating nanotechnology will actually can attach to your DNA. And why am I saying this? In this article, it says you can change a species in 6 generations by utilizing this technology. Now, what she was sharing with me is that their agenda, she believes the agenda is to change our species so we are no longer classified as human. Then you have government agencies and corporations who now have a patent over you, because by definition you're not human anymore if you have this tech in you. And that was her take on this. And I had to take it very seriously because I was invited to attend the Presidential Bioethics Commission in the University of San Francisco Teaching Hospital. And Amy Gutman was the chair, and this was created under Obama. And she point blank said this to us in that meeting, and this was televised all over the world, that they are the elite one. They are the top 1% of the elite 1%. That should be making decisions on what we can and cannot do to our bodies. So they literally said that we are too stupid to make good, sound judgment on what should be done to our autonomy. So I have to believe that it's true.
It's scary what that 1% of 1% is capable of. And I think in the last 4 years, we've seen that. I mean, going back to COVID, lockdown, there were people putting out videos and pictures saying there was something in those jabs. You know, there was people showing stuff stuck to their arm. I mean, it got debunked, but was that them covering their tracks? Now, that was a great time to distribute a lot of nanotech. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Have you had anybody who had no symptoms before that big rollout and then come through your door going, I'm hearing noises and stuff, but then saying that, how many people went to their doctor instead of you?
Yeah, and that's the sad thing. Look, they're talking about using our mental institutions to put more of this stuff in people, and then they're releasing them out. And this is why there is no such thing as privacy if you're around someone who has this tech in them. Before you needed a warrant here in the U.S. to listen in on anyone. But not only are they able to listen in on everyone, they're able to see what's going on in the environment. And that's what's crazy. You know, so I'm thank you for this platform. It's important to share with everyone, and this has been our mission. And we're going to continue to do this until we get movement. But we need, these people are suffering. It's torture. It is a horrific, slow kill. It destroys lives. And what typically happens is once someone starts experiencing this phenomenon, they start telling everyone around them. Then they become isolated because people think they're nuts because no one knows about this. And so then when they lose their social platforms, their safeguards, then they start talking to people at work about it. So then they become unemployed. And so then they're homeless and they're out in the streets. So how many people who are homeless are really afflicted by this phenomenon, and it's not mental illness? How many of our veterans are afflicted by this phenomenon, and it's not mental illness? And how many innocent lives have been destroyed because this has been inflicted upon them? You know, these are really tough questions that need to be answered.
Yes. I mean, have you managed to track down any of the companies that have produced these voice grain ones yet?
Yeah, well, we know VeraChip has been one. We know DARPA. We know Raytheon, IBM, Qualcomm. These are just a few of the companies that are producing this type of technology, but it's all been farmed out to independent subcontractors, so the government has plausible deniability. But you know, I have tons of data on these implants. This was just a small example. We do have other cases, and again, it's all the same stuff. It's all biotech, biosensors that they're being pulled out.
Yeah. I mean, I was just looking at that document that you showed us, and I could see it said IBM at the top of it. So I'm assuming this is a declassified IBM document. Is that correct?
Well, no, it was intercepted. This was not supposed to be in the public arena. Yeah. Dawn DeVore, who worked for the Department of Corrections, that's why she became a whistleblower, and they started using the technology on her, trying to get her, people to diagnose her as being a 5150, which means, you know, you're, in law enforcement terms, it allows them to put a 72-hour hold on you to be evaluated by psychiatry. And then they label you that, and then you're discredited. because no one's going to believe you about anything. But she intercepted this document and used it in her lawsuit.
Wow. Is that still ongoing, or is that totally resolved now, her lawsuit?
Unfortunately, she settled out of court. We were hoping that she would have gone all the way because it would have helped tens of thousands of people. But, you know, we have this. They can no longer say, you know, you guys are a bunch of tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, because it's not a conspiracy anymore. Not only do we intercept the document, we're pulling out the implants now of people.
Yeah. So, you know what? It feels like we've been told this for the last 20 years. You know, when they joked about tinfoil hats and stuff, wow, maybe there was actually something in that, because those people were blocking the original RF signals. I mean, I don't know. I'm not frequency literate or anything, but when you get the feeling that they've drip fed a lot of this to us over the last few years, and the RF frequency, how are they sending it? How are they receiving it? That's the other thing.
Yeah. So you remember earlier in the interview, I mentioned that we've taken people deep down under the Earth's surface in granite caverns. And in these areas, there's no cell towers. You don't get cell signal. You don't even get radio signal to listen to the radio. And so when we took them down and we bring out our frequency detectors, we still get the frequencies deep down. So the only thing that could be, at least in that scenario, is from satellite. So one who knows anything about telecommunications or the way our networks work today, everything's integrated. Not only do we have tower-based networks, but they integrate with the satellites. So it's a complete geographical node. So it's very difficult to escape this. You have to be in a skiff in order to be away from this. And this is why Colonel Egren, when he gave testimony, he says, "Are you telling us who is this? Is this the Russians?" And in some of the cases it is. There was a classified case in Florida that he made reference to, but it's not in all the cases. And so you have to say, I just lost my train of thought. You had asked, what was the question?
How do they send and receive the signals?
Okay, yeah. So he said, put me in a skiff, and then I'll tell you who to go after, what doors to knock down, who to subpoena. Okay, so they know, at least in some of the cases, who's doing this. But like I say, I strongly believe, based on the fact that it's happening on every continent with the exception of Antarctica, that we are in an arms race. And what Putin had said in that article, I think that's what everyone's afraid of. They want to make sure that they're the ones who master these psychotronic weapons before someone else does. But nonetheless, the bottom line is what does this mean? It's complete control over our species. And, are we prepared for that?
Well, I don't think I am, Jesse, in all honesty. And there I was thinking AI Skynet Terminator was going to be our downfall. But if they can control our mood, memories, probably what we even do during the day, then they don't need to worry about police anymore, armies, nothing like that. They can just turn us all off with a flick of a button.
Exactly.
And it's quite harrowing to understand that they are far more ahead with this technology than you can possibly imagine, that it is now up to the undetectable level unless you narrow that frequency all the way down to where it is and get it out of you. And that is phenomenal. I mean, going back to your slides, they're coming in all sorts of shapes and sizes now.
Correct.
And
correct.
It's not like, oh, you're looking for the rice grain implant anymore. No, you need to be far more clever now.
Yeah.
Which
sorry. There's some movements where people are trying to make it cool. put these implants in your arm from your elbow to your hand. I just watched a video today of a guy who's doing this, and I'm like, you have no idea what you're in for by just accepting this, because this is complete slavery. This is the human species. Animals have more rights than us now. I mean, it's in our face. And when is everyone gonna wake up and start to stand up for at least our species, or at least your children or your great grandchildren or future? Because what are they in for? There's a video that we put out about Havana syndrome, and in it was then Senator Biden doing a confirmation hearing for one of our chief justices, and he says, mark my words, during your tenure, you're going to have to rule on whether or not it's constitutional to put a microscopic tag in a person. And he goes, mark my words, you will rule on that. Then you have Francis Collins talking about, he's discussing MRI scans and these unusual things that they're finding in him. He goes, UBOs, unidentified bright objects. Do you want one in your brain? Well, you might. And he goes on to disclose that what the future is holding is they'll be able to tell, well, this person will be a doctor. We'll put the doctor chip in you, or this person is going to be a sanitation worker. We'll put that chip in you, or this one's going to be a detective or a scientist or whatever. But this is what they were talking about, and this was in 2005.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've been on this journey the last 4 years, and I've heard all sorts, but to see the physical evidence of these chips takes this to a whole new level now. And I've got to ask you, is there any way that people can check themselves?
So that's a good question. If you think this is happening to you, you're going to have to use extreme caution if you're going to go to your general practitioner. I don't advise telling your general practitioner what your theory is, okay? Because even we approach it very conservatively. Just because you come up positive on a preliminary RF scan doesn't mean you have an implant, okay? We have to get you in that environment where we have an anechoic chamber, see if we're still detecting frequencies, then we can say there's a probable foreign body that's causing this emission. And then you have to find doctors who are willing to take these out. That is becoming very, very, very difficult. We are running out of resources because these doctors are afraid of losing their livelihood, losing their practices, losing, in some cases, I've had doctors lose tens of millions of dollars over this phenomenon. So I caution you, if you go to your doctor, just talk about the symptoms, okay? If you're having the auditory stuff, just say, I have this severe buzzing in my ear. Tinnitus, yeah, because that's what you're going to get diagnosed with. And we now have a way to block this. You can't cure tinnitus, but this you can. We have a way to block it so you no longer hear that, at least that ringing, that high-pitched ringing. It's around 10, 11 kilohertz. So
almost like you can test yourself by trying what you're about to probably tell us. And if that, or how your process is, I should say. Correct. And if the tinnitus, shall we say, disappears, then there's a very good chance you may have an implant.
Correct.
We have to be very careful with our wording here.
Correct. Yes. So, to speak on that, so my client who had those 3 specimens removed, which all came back as biosensors, okay, she had the high-pitched ringing. Now, she has, for whatever reason, they believe there's 2 in her TMJ, and she was scheduled to go to Stanford University to have these removed. They already had 3 implants removed from other parts of her body. So as soon as she got there, and this was a year in the making, she had to wait a year before she got in there. And when she got in there, someone told them they could not remove them. So she's still left with this. So we tried our technique, and basically what we use a frequency generator, okay? And we'll set that frequency generator to the same frequency as that high-pitched whine that's coming in. And what will happen, and you have to use what I always advise, using noise-canceling AirPods or some type of headset, because here's what will happen. If you're a victim of this, it will completely block out that signal. You won't hear it anymore. And it was very emotional for her, 20 years of being subjected to this, and then it's all of a sudden she can not hear it now. But who will hear it is a family member who's not a victim. And that sound is deafening. It will drive you nuts, literally. And so this is why I say you have to use noise canceling devices so that you can continue to hear ambient noises, so you can engage with your family and friends normally. But it will also, with that frequency generator we can put it on your phone if we need to. It will block out that high frequency whine for yourself. But that's another way that we feel that can be utilized as a diagnostic tool to see whether or not this is technology, or you truly have a disease process. Do you really truly have tinnitus or Meniere's disease, is what they typically diagnose you with.
I mean, if I was to say I've got a family member who's got tinnitus and they've been diagnosed with it, and they first off thought it was earwax in their ear, and they've had it sometimes off and on as well, which is interesting.
That's interesting.
But I'm wholeheartedly, now I've seen pictures and you've touched these biosensors. I truly believe that there's got to be people out there, more people, as you said, tens of thousands, that have probably got these sensors in. Do you mind me going back to that lady that you helped? How does she got 3 sensors put into her? Correct.
And what was the question? You cut out for just a second.
How do you think she ended up with, how did she think those 3 sensors got into her?
Yeah, she had some type of conflict, but not her. She believed it was a neighbor who was an ENT doc.
Yeah.
If I recall, and she believes this is how it happened to her, but that's just speculation right now. But we do know that these were injected in her at some point in her lifetime.
Yeah. Well, as you said, they're undetectable, so it's no one's going to know if they're even putting them in you. Wow, what an interview, Jesse! And there I was thinking we were just going to have a little short one, but honestly, we need to get you back on because there's so much more to cover here. Because we need to start digging into the agencies, we need to start digging into these companies, we need to bring this awareness right the way to the surface, because, as you said, they are now manipulating people without people even realizing they're being manipulated.
Yeah. Well, think about alien abductions. Think about this MyLab phenomenon where people believe they're in this super soldier program. I'm not saying that that's not real, because remember, they can imprint experiences in you, and you will relive it because these memories will activate your neurons, and you're going to have that physiological response to whatever that experience was that was imprinted in you. So who's to say that these abductions weren't imprints? We have to rule it out.
Yeah. Jesse, thank you for joining us. What a powerful interview this has been. Where can everybody find you, just in case they've got questions or they're local to you and they want to be tested?
Yeah, you can reach us at mindnexuslive.com, MINDNEXUS live.com, and just send us a little note in our contact form, and we'll answer whatever question you have.
Jesse, thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Take care.
Great. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye now.